prophecy, Commander-in-Chief. And it says, the Spirit of God says, I have chosen this man, Donald Trump, for I will use this man to bring honor, respect, and restoration to America. America will be respected once again as the most powerful and prosperous nation on earth. The dollar will be the strongest it has ever been in history of the United States and will once again be the currency by which all others are judged. The Spirit of God says the enemy will quake and shake and fear this man I have anointed. They will even quake and shake when he announces he is running for president. It will be like the shot heard across the world. The enemy will say, what shall we do now? This man knows all our tricks and schemes. We have been robbing America for decades. What shall we do to stop this? The Spirit says, no one shall stop this that I have started. For the enemy has stolen from America for decades, and it stops now. For I will use this man to reap the harvest that the United States has sown for, and plunder from the enemy what he has stolen, and return it sevenfold back to the United States. For this next president will be a man of his word. When he speaks, the world will listen and know that there is something greater in him than all the others before him. This man's word is his bond, and the world and America will know this, and the enemy will fear this, for this man will be fearless. The Spirit says when the financial harvest begins, so shall it parallel in the spiritual for America. The Spirit of God says in this next election they will spend billions to keep this president in. It will be like flushing their money down the toilet. Let them waste their money, for it comes from and is being used by evil forces at work, but they will not succeed. For this next election will be a clean sweep for the man that I have chosen. They will say things about this man, the enemy, but it will not affect him. They shall say it rolls off of him like the duck. For as the feathers of a duck protect it, so shall my feathers protect this next president. Even mainstream news media will be captivated by this man and the abilities that I have gifted him with, and they will even begin to agree with him, says the Spirit of God.
Amazing. This is truly amazing. Mark, it reads like you wrote it last week.
Right.
That's why it took me back so strongly, because I kept looking at the date.
Right.
Yeah, so anyway, that was Mark, and Mark he's actually a retired firefighter, and he got this word, and it was, like I said, it was back in 2011, so he just kind of put it away, like you do when you get something from God, and you just say, well, I don't know if that applies or not, because the election came and went, but he said he was watching television, and he heard Donald Trump speaking, and something went off in his spirit, and he said, that's the President of the United States. So he is fully convinced that Donald Trump is going all the way to the Oval Office.
Well, let me ask you a question. So when God gave him this prophetic word in 2011, did he know who it was at the time?
Yeah, he knew it was Donald Trump.
Wow.
Because it came following that, like when he was watching him on TV, and he saw him, and they heard, like an inward witness jump up inside of him and say, that's the next president. That's the President of the United States speaking.
So here's the thing. So an opposing view will say this. They'll say, well, that's completely subjective, and it is subjective.
Sure.
That's completely subjective, and Trump has changed his mind so many times, on so many things, and it's like, what do we really know about what he believes? Now, I always push back on that and say, well, there's interviews with him from 30 years ago, and we know that even back then he was fed up with America losing in trade wars.
Exactly.
So, there were some things way back then that we knew, but, if we're going to be fair about it, as a big businessman, he's got to play the game with everybody, Democrat, Republican. So, I don't think that you can be, it's like you have the never-Trumpers who, are their standard is so high. I don't think it's fair. But at the same time, my concerns with him are that, at least with Reagan, you knew where Reagan was coming from. All you got to do is look at the speeches that he made when he stumped for Barry Goldwater in the 1960s. Right. But, that's not to say, it's like when we're talking about how, in the bigger picture, throughout the history of the world, how God has moved history. There's times where God does intervene, because ultimately in a cosmic chess match, and you alluded to this earlier, read the back of the book. So God is always infinitely ahead of where our little pea-brain minds are, which means
that's right.
And this is where, and let me just say this is where you see in history, like you see in the book of Isaiah, God prophesying about Cyrus before Cyrus even existed, and through the prophet Isaiah, and he's saying, "Behold, my anointed one, Cyrus, who I will raise up." Well, Cyrus was a pagan.
Yeah.
He was worshipped. He was a Zoroastrianist.
He was a heathen. Yeah.
He was a heathen. But, there's times in history.
He was a pagan. He built temples to all these other gods.
Yes. But, he was at least open to God guiding him and leading him. Is that going to be the case with this prophetic word? I don't know. So, in this show, bro, that we're not always going to agree 100% on everything. So my stance on it is, I'm not saying it is, but I'm not saying it isn't. I don't really know.
Right.
Time will tell. But I will say this: I don't hear anything in it. So I have friends in the ministry that I know they'd go crazy. They'd be like,
"Oh yeah, they'd blow a gasket." But let me tell you something.
Blow a gasket.
Let me tell you something. Those guys, you can't argue with the facts. And if you look at, he had 16 very qualified candidates running alongside of him, and he eliminated them all one by one.
I know.
Now, whether he was totally ethical, whether he was a nice, he wasn't always, what the conservative, those that are conservatives that consider themselves to be purists.
He wasn't Reagan-esque. Let's just say that.
Right,
when it came to that.
Yeah. He's like a carnival barker, and everybody's waiting for him to pivot. But one after the other, they fell. And everybody that comes up against him, even whole news media outlets coming up against him, are coming down after they attack him. That's a sign of the anointing. You don't need a whole lot of convincing.
Got to interrupt. That reminds me of Reagan, because you and I saw it. We witnessed it. We both voted for Reagan twice. I used to watch the State of the Union. I loved it. I'd be fist pumping, sitting there in the living room watching it. And what you just said, that was Reagan. He would have the media tied up in knots. They'd be in fits. They couldn't figure out why they kept. It was like they come against him 3 ways and they flee 7. He would hand their butts to them.
Despised Reagan. Reagan was the worst to the media. The media hated him. They said he wasn't qualified. He didn't have enough of experience. He was just, they called him a monkey movie actor, an actor, and they said he's just, what qualifies him? And so anyway, but let's go. I don't know where, we've got so much to look at, but I want us to chew this up and digest it a little bit, and scrutinize it. It says let the others judge prophetically, those that have prophetic knowledge, those that are recognized as having prophetic track record. Let them judge the word that goes forth. So let's listen to soundbite number 2. Basically, he's saying that Trump knows the schemes of those that are in power and the corrupt systems under judgment.
The prophecy says they will even quake and shake when he announces he is running.
Yeah.
The enemy will say, "What shall we do now?" This man knows our tricks and schemes.
Sure. Absolutely. How many times have you heard him sit up there since then and say, "Hey, I know all this about such and such a group. This is what China's trying to do. This is what Mexico's trying to do." These aren't friends of the United States. You know what I mean? A lot of times. So he's exposing everything right now.
Wait, he knows how international business works.
Exactly.
And he knows the way the deals are made.
Yes.
And that terrifies the people who are doing the deals.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
they're
shaking. The powers, not only the earth is shaken, but the very heavens are being shaken with this guy, Trump.
Let me say this too, brother. Part of it, this is just an observation. Part of it is, he has an incredible business acumen. So, all the Trump haters, be they Democrat or Republican, they love to talk about his bankruptcies and his failures. Okay, which it really infuriates me because it's not really a fair argument. Because let me tell you something: you when you're in business at that level, you have to take risks. And if you're not willing to take risks, you're not going to do anything. And he's taken risks, and sometimes he's lost, but he's won more than he's lost. And as a 20-year career sales rep, with what happens, Trump's not exactly. I mean, he's businessman, right? But a lot of what he does is sales. So because in other words, he has to convince a lot of people of a lot of things, and he's very, very good at it. He's very good at it. He's very good at reading reading a person's body language, knowing where he's at in any given deal, knowing when to talk, knowing when to shut up, knowing when to, really drop the hammer on somebody as opposed to, maybe soft pedaling someone. So part of his success, his recent success in what he's doing, I believe, is a gifting that he has. But when I look at it objectively, I scratch my head and I go, you know what? This is more than a coin. There's no, you can't explain this in mere earthly terms. It does seem to go beyond even someone that has an exceptional gifting in business.
Right. Even if he were a genius, disguising as someone who can only talk at a fourth grade level, you can't account for him just showing up in Scotland the day after Brexit vote turns out that they want to leave the EU and the UK. I mean, he just happens to show up the morning of and has a press conference and is answering questions from the press from Great Britain.
Yeah.
And Scotland.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that you alluded to it a few minutes ago. You alluded to it when you said that when you look at how one potential candidate after another just fell for him, one after another, after another, after another. Mm-hmm. And here again, look.
Right after they attacked him, they would fall.
But here's the thing.
Attacked him.
Part of it, no doubt, is that he's absolutely fearless. He's not afraid to say what we all know, what we're all thinking, right? Certainly that's part of it. But then you say to yourself, but wait a minute. I mean,
self-confidence alone couldn't really account.
There you go. And that's what I'm saying. That's what causes me to say, wow, maybe there is something more going on here than just luck.
Yeah, good point. Let's go to soundbite number 3, and there's a little bit more of a spiritual emphasis in this part.
And he knows the way the deals are made.
Yes.
And that terrifies the people who are doing the deals.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't want to get off track, but I mean, because there's more to say about that. But he is going to be used. It says right here, he will use this man to reap the harvest the United States has sown for and plunder from the enemy what he has stolen and return it back sevenfold to the United States. Now, everybody always says that America's under judgment. No, it's not. The systems are. But what God's going to do is he's going to go back and reap this harvest. Now, I didn't know much about Donald Trump when I wrote this. I knew he was a very powerful, wealthy individual who created a huge